Hi, welcome to our daily encounter. In Psalms 106, the psalmist is going through Israel's history and talking about the times that they had really failed God and fallen short to the standard that He had given them. And in the midst of doing this, he mentions some things that went on in the wilderness. And in verse 19 and 20, this is what he says. He says, "They made a calf in Horeb and worshipped a molten image. Thus they exchanged their glory for the image of an ox that eats grass." So they had exchanged their glory. God was their glory. God was the one that had brought them through the Red Sea. God was the one that carried them about in the wilderness, that directed them and guided them. And yet they exchanged that glory for an ox that eats grass, or the image of an ox that eats grass. Not even an ox, it's just an image of an ox. And we read about that and we think, wow, how could they do that? Here they've seen so many miracles by God. And God had brought them out of Egypt with the 10 plagues that showed His power. He brought them out and parted the Red Sea and helped them through the wilderness, guided them. How in the world could they then exchange what they had with God for an image of an ox that eats grass? This reminded me of what Paul spoke about in Romans chapter 1 when he talked about the Gentile nations and how they had gone through this moral downward spiral. And he uses the same language in that they had exchanged some things. It says in verse 21, it says, "For even though they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man, and of birds, and of four-footed animals, and crawling creatures." Paul calls them foolish. He calls their heart foolish. As a matter of fact, he even calls them just outright fools. He says, professing to be wise, they became fools. And rightfully so. Paul calls them that rightfully so, because wouldn't you think a person a fool who exchanges something that is really, really good for something really, really bad? For instance, if I would exchange my vehicle, my truck, that is running fine, has AC, has good tires on it. If I was to go to the junkyard and exchange that truck for some shell of a car that doesn't even crank, that doesn't even have an engine in it, all the tires are missing, and I exchange my truck for that car, well, you would think I was a fool. Why would I do that? It would be a great loss on my part to exchange something that was working fine with something that didn't work at all. Not to even mention the loss of money that I would incur by making such an exchange. But that's what people oftentimes do. They exchange God for something lesser, something, and it may not even be an idol. And we have to ask ourselves, yeah, maybe we're Christians, maybe we read the Bible, we have kind of a relationship with God. But in the particulars of our lives, do we sometimes exchange God for something lesser? Do we sometimes pass up opportunities to spend alone time with the Lord, to watch TV, or to get onto our electronic devices, or to do something else? How much do we value our relationship with God? And how many times do we exchange promoting that relationship by these earthly, worldly things We have a God that is our companion, a God who is our friend. We have a God who loves us like a father. We have a God who is king and ruler over the whole universe. We have a God of immeasurable power. We have a God that can give us comfort. We have a God that can bring us peace. We have a God that can bring us strength. And even though we know all of these things to be true, we still turn to earthly things. Earthly things just for maybe a quick fix, maybe to get some pleasure fulfilled or some desire met, maybe to just pass the time. And all the while, the God of glory, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords is there waiting on us to engage in prayer, in devotion time with Him, in a loving relationship with Him. And so before we think how preposterous it is that these Israelites exchanged their glory for an image of an ox that eats grass, what do we exchange our glory for? What do we exchange God for in our lives? So let's just think about that today. As you're going through the day, think about the many decisions, choices that you make. When you have a choice to make between, am I going to cultivate my relationship with the Lord or just entertain myself and pass time with earthly things? I think it might be actually very revealing to go through the day and think about that. Well, I thank you guys for listening in today. Hope you guys do have a great day. I love you guys. God bless.